Let's talk some nationals, shall we? Let's talk about this is all in the future. Maybe in 2 months, maybe in 3 months, everyone is going to be complaining about tier 0 Horus decks. Who knows if that's the timeline we're living in? But I know the timeline we're definitely living in is the one where French nationals and a couple of big regionals happened this past weekend, and we need to look at the metagame to prepare for German nationals. That's the timeline that we definitely live in. So let's take care of that. In case you weren't here yesterday, we did watch party the entire thing. We saw, honestly, a crazy event where last year's national champion, who won last year with Dragon Link, made it all the way to the finals again with Dragon Link. Unfortunately lost. But the winner also, which makes it even crazier, is the Tristan Ramond is the winner of French nationals the before Mathieu won last year. So the finals was basically a match between the last 2 French national champions. And Tristan Ramond is now a 2-time French national champion by sheer logic. It was 4 years ago. Yes, you are right. It was 2019, but there was no nationals in 2020 and 2021. So those were the last 2 French nationals. 2020 and 2021, we didn't have nationals because of COVID. So those were the last 2 national champions. Tristan piloted Kashtira. And Kashtira also won in Denmark. It hasn't been uploaded to the spreadsheet yet, but I was told that Denmark Nationals was also won by Kashtira. We're gonna look at the breakdowns and everything in a second. But the most important news is that both European nationals after the most recent ban list were taken down by Kashtira. That is something we will talk about today, for sure. That is something we need to talk about. We need to make out the situation of Kashtira in the current metagame. First off, for some context, I want to look at some of the breakdowns, though, because we have overall breakdowns. We have overall breakdown, and we have top cut breakdown for French nationals, which is very interesting because this was a national with over 2,000 players. So it's literally the biggest national to date. So probably the most important set of data we could ask for in preparation for German nationals. Let me enhance this a little bit. Let me see. That is better. Okay, let's look at overall deck representation first. And then talk about how decks converted. Also, you can see on the top of my screen, I have a ton of deck profiles already lined up. We have stuff to look at today. There's interesting decks. They have cleaned up the deck breakdown a little bit, because yesterday when we looked at it, it was like a kind of a mess between Branded was the most represented deck in the breakdown yesterday. But it wasn't really accurate because there were like 4 different sprite variations that they all put as different versions. So now they have unified them to one, which actually I think makes a lot more sense. And it turns out Sprite was the most represented deck at the event. I think this includes decks like Melfi Sprite. Obviously, we saw Adventure Sprite make it all the way. I think it was top 4. Life Twin Sprite, also a thing. Now, I don't think this includes Life Twin Runic Sprite, because I think that is in Runic variants. I think Runic variants is divided between Furhire Runic Sprite and Life Twin Runic Sprite. Maybe a couple of Naturia Runics or Runic Stuns, but I didn't see any of those anywhere. Not in Top Cut, not in the feature matches. Maybe some people played that. I mean, probably some people turned up with Naturia Runic or Runic Stun. But for the most, or Plunder Runic, yeah, good point. Plunder Runic is a deck. But for the most part, I would assume the biggest portion of these 5.8% would be Runic Life Twin Sprite and Runic Furhire Sprite. So the order in which decks were represented: most represented Sprite, then Branded, then Kashtira, then Dragon Link, then oh no, I skipped Runix. Runix, Dragon Link, Labyrinth, Sword Soul, Math Mech, Trap Tricks, Sky Striker, Purely, and others. That was the overall deck representation. Honestly, pretty much expected. I mean, if we look at, hold up, let me just quickly check my like tier list that I made for this, what I expected to be like represented and good. Let me quickly go there. Yeah, the one thing that is interesting, hold up. So what I did is I put Life Twin Runic Sprite, Labyrinth, and Kashtira in the highest tier. Those decks are among the top. Labyrinth a little bit. Maybe I overrated Labyrinth, or maybe people just don't like Labyrinth, but there's Branded, there's Sprite variations, there's Dragon Link up here. The only deck that it was like not very much represented that I was expecting to see was Rika. Rika seemed... We saw some feature matches, I feel like. We saw some feature matches for Rika, but not really... There's not that many players for it. But the people that... The thing about Rika is like the people that do play Rika, usually there's always a couple people that do well, right? With Rika. All right, top cut breakdown, even more important, honestly. How did these decks convert? Sprite variants, most represented decks in the tournament, most represented decks in top cut. Kashtira, second most represented deck in top cut. Story checks out, you know, was very well represented in the event. A lot of them made it to top cut, makes a lot of sense. Branded, also solid conversion rate, you know, they're not the second most represented anymore as they were in the tournament, but still a bunch of brandeds. Dragon Link, also doing well in terms of representation, and Runic Twin Sprite also. I think, considering the fact that this is not just this is only Runic variants, right? Not all of this is Runic Twin Sprite, but then like they made like almost 10% of top cut is Runic Life Twin Sprite. I think this is also a very good result. Now the Vanquish Soul, for a deck that didn't even appear in this overall deck breakdown, which means it has like less than 2%, 2.6% representation, for that deck to show up with like almost 5% top cut representation is pretty solid. Now, I'll tell you right now, exactly where I stand on Vanquish Soul. My 100% honest opinion on Vanquish Soul, and also my take on it for Nationals. You guys know I picked up the cards. I showed you this yesterday. I also told you on Twitter. I have picked up a Vanquish Soul core. It's right here in front of me on my desk. Now, I told you also last week that I think the deck is slightly overpriced, and I don't know if it's a good investment because the deck isn't that good. If you're looking for a solid investment, you shouldn't buy it. Now, when I bought Vanquish Soul, I didn't buy it because it was a good investment or because I thought it was a good investment. I still stand by that. I only bought it because I think the deck is incredibly fun. And I was willing to spend the money on it, even though I don't think I'm gonna play it at a huge event because I don't think it's good enough yet. I was willing to spend it because I want to bring it to like smaller tournaments. Maybe I'm gonna go to locals to play it. Maybe I'm gonna go to regionals to play it when regionals return after Euros. I just wanted to have the deck because I like it. I still don't think that the deck is top tier. The fact that it gets some top cut spots still makes me happy because while I don't think it's the best choice for an event, it still shows that it can do something. So I'm on the fence where like if it gets a little bit of help, maybe one more solid support card, maybe after another ban list, the deck can actually be very good, right? Because right now I think it's somewhere in tier 2. That's what shows here. I wouldn't exaggerate on this, right? I'm sure some of this success is also due to the fact that people don't know the deck yet. People don't know how to play against it perfectly. People aren't aware of how the deck works. You can catch some people off guard. All of these factors can factor into Vanquish Soul getting a bunch of top cuts. And also the closest, I think, was Enzo Duval, who got, I believe it was top 8 with Vanquish Soul, which is a very, very, very good achievement. I believe this is due to the fact that Vanquish Soul is relatively new. Vanquish Soul is solid. I still don't think that Vanquish Soul is top tier. I personally am not going to play it for German nationals. I'm like 99.9% sure about that. I would have to be like, there need to be like a real revelation this week for me to switch over to Vanquish Soul, but I don't think so. My current, and this is something that I really like about this week of content creation and this German nationals in particular, is I don't have to be very... Like, I don't have to keep it a secret what I think of this format and what I'm going to play, because most people will know anyways. I'm like literally 99.9% sure I'm going to play this deck. Or Runic for Higher Sprite. Those are basically, in my mind, they're pretty much the same deck, just slightly different versions. I'm going to play some version of Runic Sprite, and I don't have to be very, like, I don't have to keep it a secret. I don't have to tell you guys anything else. I'm going to be playing some Runic Sprite because I think it's very good. I've changed my mind a little bit on Dragon Link. I think Dragon Link was an option for me. I was thinking about running Dragon Link at Nationals. I'll tell you why I won't. I think it's still, if you want to bring Dragon Link, I think it's fine. I think Dragon Link is in a fine position because it has solid matchups against a bunch of these top tier decks. My biggest issue is this one. Kashtira, I believe, is not a good matchup for Dragon Link because of a couple reasons. D-Shifter hurts you a lot. A Rise Heart is hard to play through when you go second. When you go first, a lot of the stuff you do isn't even that great. Like, for example, Seals. Seals isn't very good against Kashtira because you can't really, like, they summon Fenrir, you have a Seals, congratulations. Yeah, what are you gonna do with it? Like, it's not great. So I think Bystial Dragon Link has a very solid matchup into sprites because your Bystials are just like large. They run over your opponent's sprite stuff. It's very good. Branded obviously struggles against Bystials. Runic Life Twin Sprite, even Bystials are very good against. In the mirror match, Bystials are pretty good. Like, it's just like across the board, it has a solid matchup spread, except here. And I just hate going into a tournament and just having a bad matchup against Kashtira. Like, it's like the one deck, it's just, out of all these decks, I don't want to have a bad Kashtira matchup. I just can't bother. Like, Kashtira is just like, I just want to beat that deck. I just want to beat that deck. I hate it. Like, I just don't want to get a Rise Hearted and have a deck that can't really play into it. I don't want to. I think overall, it's still a solid pick. Like, you know, solid matchup against Sprite, Branded, Runic decks. It's okay to play Dragon Link. But I don't want to have a bad Kashtira matchup. That's literally it. So, that's my take. So, literally, my head tells me you have to play a Runic Sprite deck, 99%. The remaining 0.1% or whatever is the fact that I love Vanquish Soul. I would love to play it, but I feel like it would be another Libromancer incident where I'm definitely not playing the best deck. You know, like, I just don't want to. I don't want to, like, I don't know, like, yeah. I think I would have more fun. My heart says Vanquish Soul is cooler, but I think I have to rock up with some Runic Sprite. Did he just admit Libro was bad? Libro wasn't bad. It was just, I don't think it was the best in hindsight. It was like, I don't know. The thing about last year's Nationals is I liked no deck, right? The thing is, last year, basically, if this format was last year's format, I would have no problem showing up with Vanquish Soul, because last year I liked nothing, right? Nothing I felt like was good. This year, it's not the case. This year, I'm looking at Runic Life Twin Sprite and I'm like, dude, this deck is strong, right? I like this deck. This deck is good. I'm good with this deck. I think I can do really well with this deck. I'm certain of it. So it's you see how it's a different situation. Like last year was kind of like a whatever meta game. I was like, this meta, I don't like this meta. I think it's kind of, I don't hate it. I don't like all the decks here. Everything kind of sucks. Let's just show up with Libromancer and see if I can do something pog with it. This year, it's not the same. This year, I don't hate the format. I think the format's actually quite entertaining. I think the format's not bad. Most of the games we've seen on stream have showed that like there's a lot of interaction. You can do a lot of decision making. You can do a lot of things right. We see you can do a lot of things incorrectly. There's a lot of skill expression in all of this format. I like this format. There's a good option in Runic Sprite. Why wouldn't I bring it? You know what I mean? It's not the same as last year. Like, it's very, very different. Even though it is also quite diverse, I think most of the decks are... Like, there's... Even though I've been saying that diversity is not always a good thing, and sometimes even a bad thing, there's definitely a difference between this type of diversity and last year's type of diversity, where, like, last year, every single top-tier deck was just trying to do the most toxic shit with, like... Scythe and adventure lines and D-barrier and anti-spell against every deck. Like even Sword Soul, the deck that was supposed to be the fair deck after siding, turns into like the most floodgate pile ever with like anti-spell, D-barrier and everything. It was just not a very enjoyable format. And like this year, most of the format is diverse, but the decks aren't doing something inherently stupid, right? Like, I mean, Kashtira is like the closest you get to a toxic strategy, and that deck nowadays passes on Arisehard and Fenrir. And yes, Arisehard is a toxic card, but it's not the same as, like, Scythe, you know? So I don't hate this format, actually. And so I really, I don't want to throw away Nationals by playing a deck that I don't believe is the best. And if you ask me, I still think this deck is the best deck, so I think I'm gonna play that, unless I discover something crazy about Vanquish Soul and, like, you know. Anyways, where was I heading? While I think it does go to show Kashtira, I don't think Kashtira winning both of these Nationals means that the ban list didn't do anything. Because literally the most common statement I've heard about this weekend was like, ha, Konami, nice ban list. Kashtira still winning those tournaments. Didn't change anything. There is a difference. I just want to point that out. Okay? I don't think we have to talk about the fact that there is a difference here. Okay? Only because the Kashtira players made it all the way to win the event. It's still always way better to look at the overall picture, right? Because at the end of the day, whether a single person wins an event or not is decided by a lot of factors. And like, it could have been one Kashtira player in Top Cut. Like, it could have been just Tristan, and he could have won the event. That would not have meant that Kashtira was the best deck ever, right? It could have been the one Tearlament player it could have been the one Tearlament player could have won the event, and people would have been like, yeah, nice ban list 6 months ago where you hit Ishizu cards. Nice ban list. That didn't do anything. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. There is a definite difference in this format and this format, okay? I just want to point that out. This was Italy. 50% Kashtira in top 32. And this was France, where Kashtira was the second most represented deck in Top Cut with only 15%. Okay? Kashtira is still good. Kashtira is still playable, which honestly, in my opinion, isn't even the worst thing in the world because people spend money on Kashtira. That's also always an aspect to consider for Konami. People spent money on Kashtira and the deck has only been good for one format. There was literally one YCS so far you could have played Kashtira at in Europe. That was YCS London. That was the only YCS where Kashtira was actually like a top tier deck because it wasn't for YCS Lyon. Right? YCS Lyon was Ishizu tier format. Kashtira was not a top deck for that format. And so I don't think they should have killed the deck immediately. People spent money on Super Heavy Samurai. In all honesty, in this case of Super Heavy Samurai, it's not Konami's fault because they didn't give Super Heavy Samurai a billion ultra rares. Right? Kashtira is different. Kashtira got Secret Rare Arisard, Secret Rare Theosis, Secret Rare Planet, Ultra Rare Fenrir, Ultra Rare Unicorn, Ultra Rare Arisard. Super Heavy Samurai got a Super Rare Vakaushi and a common Benkei. It's not the same. The Purely hit I agree with actually. The Purely, fair point. The Purely, I am not a fan of the Purely hit. I really wasn't. I was not a fan of the Purely hit because I feel really bad for the people that spent money on the Ultra Rares. They went up crazy, the Purely Ultras, and now the deck isn't really here anymore. I do feel bad about that hit. I don't think that was a warranted hit because it wasn't even like, I mean, Purely was here, right? Super Heavy Samurai was here. That's also a difference. That's also a difference we have to point out. Super Heavy Samurai is here as second most represented at most of the nationals. It was most of the nationals. Okay, here's actually more Purely. Of course, I clicked on the wrong one to make a point. But Super Heavy Samurai almost always, I think, performed better than Purely. So that's also a difference. Anyways. That is most of the things I wanted to say about French nationals. Also, let me quickly thank some subs because I didn't do that because I was busy talking. Wizard X, No Motion Plus, KH Flow, Diasaku, Esinice, Menewa, Soryora, and Berconius. Thank you all so much for the subs. I didn't forget you. I was just busy talking. Forgive me. Thank you for all the support. Appreciate you guys a lot. Holy shit, we're one away from a 1600 Andy. We've never been there, have we? Appreciate you guys. Thank you. Yes. Kashtira winning both of these events. Denmark, we don't have any top cut. We don't have any top cut stats for Denmark, but both of those events were won by Kashtira. I still don't think, and I will die on this hill, I don't think that means the ban list didn't do anything, and I don't think that means that Kashtira is... I don't think that means Kashtira is the best deck. X Kenver, thank you for these 6 months, and Kuzugutai, thank you for the prime. We're a 1600 Andy right now. That is a reason to celebrate, and you know how we celebrate. We celebrate in style. Appreciate you guys. There we go. Get the Pepe D's ready. All right, so what I wanted to say, because I see some people say it in chat, especially Skrelp. So I don't think this means Kashtira is the best deck, but Skrelp has made an excellent point where he said, I don't think this means Kashtira hits were sufficient, and the deck is still frustrating to play against. I agree with both of those statements. Watching Kashtira in the feature matches still, I think out of all the decks we've seen on feature yesterday, Kashtira was the most like frustrating one to watch, and it just looked like it was miserable to play against, right? Like literally, remember the scene where I was hyping everyone up for the finals, and I was like, "Yo, let's switch over to the finals. Let's get this game. Let's start the game. Let's see how it goes." And then they switched the camera, and they already had started playing, and there was like a shifter in the graveyard and a unicorn on the field, and I was like, dude, we can stop watching this game. This game's over, right? It's just like, you know, we don't like all this hype for the finals to begin. They cut the camera like 5 seconds late, and there's already a shifter and a unicorn. The game is already done, right? Now I think this is just a philosophy question at the end of the day, because like I said, yes, Kashtira is toxic, but at the end of the day, we are one Yu-Gi-Oh community, and I think, like, do you want this deck to die immediately on the first ban list that makes any hits to Kashtira, basically? And that is a very, like, and it's not only about, like, yes, okay, all of you saying yes, from a game design perspective, I 100% agree with you. Like, I do agree with you from a game perspective, and even if some of you, I own the deck too, and I wouldn't mind if it got destroyed, right? I have the cards. I've never played them at a tournament, but I have the cards. I would not mind if they got shafted, but I do think there's a fair point to make where, like, as a community, there's a lot of people that don't think like that, right? There is people that don't like have, like, I have Kashtira cards, but I also have other cards, right? I am fortunate enough to own different decks that I can play if Kashtira gets shafted. Not everyone is as fortunate, and I think as a community, it's nice to think about it that way as well. And like, it's not always only that one. Like, Kashtira will get hit on another ban list for sure. Kashtira will not always be meta. I think it's still fair to say that they shouldn't have killed the deck on the first thingy, because yes, they designed a deck that's kind of toxic. No, they didn't do a great job at designing Kashtira. Does that mean they need to immediately Alt F4 delete the deck first possible ban list? I don't think it means that. Maybe that's just my maybe yeah, I don't know. It's maybe you could argue that they should have done something about Dimension Shifter, because Dimension Shifter is pretty good in this format. I think if you look at the top decks, Dimension Shifter is good against Branded, good against Runic, good against Dragon Link, good against Vanquish Soul, good against Runic for Hire. I think it's even good against Rika. It's good against most sprite variations. Shifter is a card that they could have done that would have, I mean, out of all these decks, literally the only decks that play Shifter is Kashtira and then Flunder, which one Flunder topped. Like, it's basically, Shifter at this point in time is pretty much a Kashtira card. So something like a Shifter ban, I think would have been very welcome. I think that would have been very welcome. Labyrinth talk. I don't have that much to say about Labyrinth other than the fact that I'm personally surprised that it didn't do very well, because just to point out, in case anyone hasn't noticed, Labyrinth was the 6th most represented deck with 4.5% representation at a 2,000 player event, which comes out to about 90 participants. 90 participants turned up with Labyrinth. And from this breakdown, if this breakdown is accurate, keep in mind there's a couple decks missing. The other category is 4 that we are not sure what they are. One of them is, I know one of them was Dogmatica. Dogmatica topped, I remember that. But some of them could be Labyrinth. Either way, there's very few. Do you want to check the second place list? I already have both of your lists up in another tab. I'm checking your I have all of them already up here. Your on your channel, the lists. Don't worry. Labyrinth is, let's talk about the decks that didn't do so well. Speaking of Labyrinth, because it's not just Labyrinth, but there's a couple decks I want to point out as to that didn't do well, even though they were represented. And the first one is Labyrinth. Labyrinth, like I said, about 90 people entered this event with Labyrinth, and as of now, we don't know of a single one that topped. We do not have information on a single Labyrinth player that made it into Top Cut. And honestly, I'm surprised by that. There's other decks, we're going to talk about a couple decks in a bit, where I'm not so surprised that they didn't do very well. but Labyrinth is one that I'm surprised. Where like I don't think Labyrinth is bad. I actually rated Labyrinth very highly, but maybe I overestimated it a little bit, to the point where I think maybe one problem that Labyrinth has is that a similar one to Branded, where if people expect Labyrinth a lot, they actually they can really prepare for it. You know, we've seen a lot of cards that I saw in feature matches that were really good against Labyrinth are Cosmic Cyclone. We saw that here and there. We saw a lot of Ash, of course, because of Branded, and Ash negating the Labyrinth traps. Honestly, for the Furniture Labyrinth build, getting Ashed on the Labyrinth traps is really bad. Bell is also a popular card right now, even in some main decks, because Bell is pretty solid against Branded, it's okay against Runic, and it's good against Labyrinth. That was one of the reasons why people started playing Bell. So, Bell, very popular. And then another excellent point being made in chat, a couple people have said it before as well, Runic decks are an awful matchup for Labyrinth. Runic is excellent against Labyrinth, because who would have thought that the deck that can search an MST and recycle it and put it back into the deck and draw cards every turn, and like it's just an absolutely nightmare matchup for Runic deck for Labyrinth. Didn't Herman say that Runic was a free win? Herman says a lot of things. Let's just leave it at that. Herman is always very convinced by the decks he plays. And when Herman decides to play a deck, or when Herman decides to play a deck, then the deck is always incredibly broken and beats everything and loses to nothing. And like, I remember talking to Herman like a month or two ago, and I was like, hey, I think the Furnitures are really good in Labyrinth. And he was like, the Furnitures are trash, LMAO, you're trash if you even consider putting these cards into your deck. You always need to be playing a bazillion Floodgates to win. It's just busted. You flip Skill Drain, you win every time. 2 weeks later, it's like, dude, the Furnitures are busted. I don't know how anyone doesn't put the Furnitures into the deck. If you play the Furnitures, you literally beat everything. You know what I mean, right? You know what I mean? So, while I do respect Herman as a player a lot, I've had some theoretical discussions with Herman that were very frustrating, because I literally say things, and he's just like I say the most logical thing, and he'll respond with something like just a couple weeks ago, we had a talk where he told me that Lord of the Heavenly Prison is the best starter card in Labyrinth. Like midway through our discussion, like we were talking about the pros and cons of Lord of the Heavenly Prison, and then somewhere in the middle of the discussion he says like Lord of the Heavenly Prison is straight up the best starter card in Labyrinth. And then I was like, I just straight up told him, I was like, if that's your take, we just stop talking right now. We just take a break. We don't discuss any further. If you're trying to tell me that Lord of the Heavenly Prison is the best starter card in Labyrinth, then we stop talking right now. And he was like, yeah, okay. And we haven't talked about Labyrinth since. Anyways, Labyrinth didn't perform. I think the matchups aren't optimal for Labyrinth, and also people are preparing for Labyrinth. That still doesn't mean that Labyrinth is bad. I'm still surprised that no one made it. Like, I was like, okay, maybe people counter Labyrinth. Maybe people counter Labyrinth. Maybe people have some anti-cards against Labyrinth. Maybe Labyrinth doesn't have the greatest matchups overall, but it's like, I was expecting some to show up. I was like, maybe some Labyrinth here and there, you know, like 2 or 3 in Top Cut, surely. That's what I was thinking, but apparently not. Apparently that was wrong. Maybe Labyrinth has to be considered a tier 2 deck right now in this environment. Maybe it really just is, because I don't think something like this can be justified by just saying, hey, people are playing more Cosmic, or people are playing more evenly. Because let's be real, people were playing evenly before when Lab was also popular, and the people still top with it, right? So I don't think it can be said just by, you know, people are playing anti-Labyrinth cards, because people are also playing Ash and Branded is still topping. Like, some people lose to Ash in Branded, but some people still make it, you know? And I was expecting some Labyrinth to make, but maybe it's not just the anti-Labyrinth cards. Maybe it's also just the fact that that the matchups aren't great. Right? I was surprised how underrepresented Runic was, to be fair. Don't tell him. Don't tell him that. Don't tell him that. No narcs. So that was Labyrinth out of the way. So my opinion on Labyrinth, just to summarize this really quick, I still think Labyrinth is a good deck. Maybe I overestimated it a little bit. I was still surprised by how little success it saw this weekend. I thought it was going to be a little bit better. Like, it's surely not worse than Tearlaments or Flundereeze. Dogmatica topped this event. Dogmatica topped this event. Synchron, Sky Striker, Marincess, Mannadium, Dark World. Those decks topped. You know, Trap Tricks. Labyrinth isn't worse than those decks. Okay? I'm not calling those decks garbage. But Labyrinth is not worse than those decks. So that's what I was a little bit surprised to see that many Labyrinth players didn't make it to top cup. Okay, other decks that I was a little bit disappointed by, but more expected. Sword Soul is, I think, the first one we have to talk about. I also want to give a quick shout out to Pack, because I was talking to Pack about the decks for Euros and NA Nationals, and he was like, "Hey, you're gonna make fun of me, but I've been thinking about maybe Sword Soul is the pick." And then he was like, "I tested it. I played 10 games. I went 5-5." I was like, "Cool. 5-5 is exactly the type of record I'm looking for. That's exactly what I needed. A deck that goes 5-5. Let's lab some Sword Soul together." Anyways, Sword Soul was very well represented. 4.5% in the event, which, same as Labyrinth, comes out to about 90 people. 90 people played Sword Soul. Where's Sword Soul? One Sword Soul made it into top 64 out of 90. Don't play Sword Soul. Okay? Don't play Sword Soul. If you're trying to play a good deck. Like, if you're on a budget and Sword Soul is budget and you're like, okay, be my guest, play Sword Soul. But if you're actually trying to make a meta call or play a good deck, if you have expectations of doing well, Sword Soul just isn't it, dude. Sword Soul is just too fair. Sword Soul is just too fair. It's not great, this format. It really isn't. Believe me. Mathmech, 3.6% representation, which is crazy to me, honestly. That's crazy. That's some cult activity. That's some certified, like, freaking cult activity. Like, you don't... Why? Like, you're just playing that to make a point. You're just trying to prove a point by bringing Mathmech to an event. You're like, hey, I'm a Mathmech main. I'm not gonna let one circular stop me. Dude, no one topped. Mathmech is bad now. It's actually bad. Like, it's just actively not a good deck anymore. Accept it. Accept your fate, dude. I'm not bringing Paleo to these events either. And this is not even like, I'm not even hating, dude. I'm not bringing Paleo to these events. It's not good anymore. I like Paleo a lot too, but... No. No. Stop it. Stop it. Play an actual deck. Sky Striker. No! Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. I've told you before, this is like the same as MathMech pretty much, and the same as Sword Soul. Some people just have problems letting go, okay? Let go. It's easier for everyone. It's easier. It's easier for everyone if you just let go. It's gonna be less painful. I swear, it's less painful. I know. Gage went 4-0 at locals. I know. I've seen it. We've watched it together. Yes, Gage went 4-0 at locals. Yes. Let go. Let go. Okay? Please. For the sake of all of us. Let go, Chad. Let go. Purely is like the last one I want to talk about for this. Purely is the last one I want to talk about because it's like people still played it, which I find interesting. I would be interested in seeing some of these lists because I think Purely is playable as a go second deck. If people were seriously trying to go first, I don't really understand why. I don't think the deck is great going first. One reason I can think of is maybe there's a couple people that were like that literally spent a lot of money on Purely. This is more of a sad thought than anything, but maybe they spent a lot of money on Purely and they were like, I want to bring it to at least one event, you know? Maybe they coped because they spent a couple $100 on Purely and they were like, hey, let me see if it can do anything. Which is kind of sad. I'm kind of sad about the position of Purely in this meta. I think that was like, out of all the decisions they made on the last ban list, I'm like, this is the one I like the least because that deck was expensive. That deck wasn't even top tier. That deck did not deserve that treatment, I think. I don't feel like it deserved that treatment because it wasn't as good yet. So yeah, and they didn't top, as far as I'm aware. None of them made it. None of them made it, unfortunately. Yeah, a little bit sad, I think. But yeah. What can I do as a Draco Slayer player in this format versus Kashtira? Well, I mean, what everyone else is doing against Kashtira. Talents into Zeus, Kurikara, maybe Dark Ruler, those type of things. That's what you do. Whirlwind, thank you for the 2 months. Gamelrentner, thank you for the 2 months as well. And Niels Brr, thank you for the 7 months. Appreciate that. Please sign my circular. Okay, only if you ask nicely. And that's French Nationals. I saw the question in chat earlier. How do you like this format compared to last year's format? Infinitely better. Infinitely better. I don't think this format is perfect by any means, but honestly, most formats aren't perfect. But this format, I think, is a lot better. There is problems in this format. Like, for example, I think Kashtira is a little bit toxic, but honestly, Kashtira isn't toxic to the point where it's not something you can solve. Like, you can solve Kashtira in deck building, I think. Like, if you compare Kashtira to the toxic decks of last year, there's a difference between a Rysard pass or a Rysard Shangri-Ira pass or a Rysard Birth pass. There's a difference between that and Barone Scythe that like every second deck would try to do. Right? There are very different levels of beatable between those two strategies. Right? Like, dude, Kashtira is okay in my book. If there's always that one toxic deck in the format, and honestly, out of all the ones, Kashtira is like probably okay. Branded has Puppet Lock, which annoys the hell out of me, but I'm just gonna ash that real quick. And then like Runic Mirrors aren't the greatest, but everything else is feeling fine to me. You know, like last year's National, literally everyone was doing Scythe. Fluanda Reese still had Statue. Sword Soul was doing Anti-Spell D-Barrier. It was just there was Mystic Mine. You know, like, let's not talk about last year's Nationals format anymore, okay? Last year's National is Troll Despair. This one isn't a perfect format, but it's much better. Like, it's infinitely better, I think.